Nathan Baker's ended a 13-year spell with Aston Villa. The news that came out earlier today was that Nathan Baker has been linked with a move to Bristol City, club where he spent his time on loan in the 2015-2016 campaign. And it's actually materialised now that he's left the club. It's come quite out the blue and it's escalated quite quickly. And there's a bit of disappointment, I'd say, amongst the Villa fans. A lot of disbelief that this has happened, and from Dan and I as well. So we're going to sort of give our viewpoints on what's happened in letting Nathan Baker leave for one of the other Championship sides in Bristol City and what it means for Aston Villa. So Nathan Baker's been with us since the age of 13. In 2004 he joined us as a youth and has been with us ever since, and he was one of the main academy graduates a few years ago alongside the likes of Kieran Clark. Now at the age of 26 last season he was one of the pinpoints, one of the most important players of the Villa side alongside James Chester at centre-half. He was just a real fan favourite. He had the magic hat and everyone loved him because he was that warrior image. But we've since had John Terry come into the club and Chris Samba, and if you look at the pecking order of where this leaves Nathan Baker, it would probably left him as fourth choice centre-back potentially, which for a man that last season was one of the best defences of the league, it's bizarre to think that he'd go from a starting role to being fourth choice centre-back in the Aston Villa team. But that's the way it's happened this summer. That's the way it's materialised. It seems a bit short-sighted to sell him, given the fact that John Terry didn't really play many games last season and he is getting quite old now. The same goes for Chris Samba as well. Both guys that have had injuries in the past, both going to an age now where they're going to struggle potentially with many matches after each other. And then you've got James Chester as well, who obviously will be starting, or so you'd hope, in the new season. This just leaves you with this situation now where, what if John Terry gets injured? What if Chris Samba gets injured? That leaves you then with one main first choice centre-half who realistically will be playing games, and that is James Chester. Tommy Elphick will probably most likely leave this summer, and Mick Richards is not a centre-half. He'll never ever be a centre-half, let alone a right-back at the moment, the way his fitness is. So it leaves us with the only options of the youth of Issa Suleiman, Bidu, and then as well Kevin Toner. That's three youngsters that could potentially come in to fill in the gaps if Chris Samba did get injured and John Terry did get injured. But then it's just bizarre. I can't get my head around why we'd want to do this. It's obviously FFP motivated, or so you'd assume, that Villa have had to go and sell Nathan Baker. We knew this summer would be the case of trimming the squad down, but I don't think anybody expected to lose a first team regular. And then you could switch this though and say that perhaps Nathan Baker wanted the move. Perhaps the concepts of perhaps being fourth choice wasn't what he wanted. Perhaps he wanted to carry on playing week in, week out. And I can't blame him for that, because it's going to be tough for him to dislodge John Terry and James Chester, for example. And perhaps in his mind he's thinking, well, the manager's shown me no loyalty here. I had a great season last season, yet I'm being dumped. I've been put on the scrap heap. And I understand where he's coming from that sentiment, if that is the case. He's obviously got to fight for his place, but by signing these players, it's obviously going to improve the competition. But for me, really, Baker should be one of those starting players. There's some fans that will say that he's not been good enough still in the past season, and it's been James Chester carrying him. But then it takes two to be a centre-back partnership. It doesn't take one. It takes two to tango, as the saying goes. So really, for that sentiment, I'm a bit gutted, because I don't think Nathan Baker deserved to sort of get shoved down that pecking order as he has done for me. I'm going to read some of your views out from Twitter now that we've had in on the Villa View, at the Villa View _ on Nathan Baker leaving. Perry said, worryingly short-sighted approach. JT and Samba will be off at the end of the season. Yeah, it could be really short-sighted, and I think it is. Nathan Baker's 26. He's nearly 10 years younger than John Terry and Chris Samba, nearly. And when you've got that many years on you, you're entering your heydays, your peak of your career at the age of 26, to lose him to a side that's also in the Championship in Bristol City is bizarre. I think it says a lot, though, potentially on the opposite side of the scale of why Bristol City, if he is that good. How come he's ended up at Bristol City and not Middlesbrough, for example? Jason Cockerell's made a good point of Jednak and Delac can both play at centre-back, might be playing with a back four. Yeah, I've touched on this in a video before, that it seems to be that we're pushing towards this back five now. But by selling Nathan Baker, who is our only left-footed centre-half, it points towards actually going back to a 4-4-2, or four at the back in general, whichever way you want to play further forward. For that perspective, there's that. And then Jednak, we saw against Preston, most notably last season, he dropped in at centre-half, and he looked okay, he looked quite competent. I think that's where the long-term future of Emil Jednak is. Perhaps that could be why Glenn Whelan's been brought in as well, to allow that. But really, we're still running heavily low on the ground of depth because Rick Richards, no. Tommy Elphic's going. He's not going to be sticking around at Villa Park, you know. I can't get my head around it, especially as he's one of our only left-sided players. P. Duckhouse has said no one wants to buy Richards or Elphick. Got to me centre-half, and he's not very good. Don't get why it's confusing. I think it's slightly harsh to say he's not very good because he was one of the best defences of the league last season. But then, as you've touched on very rightfully there, that when there's no demand for Tommy Elphick, well, probably is a little bit, we don't know yet, there's definitely no demand for Mick Richards, then it leaves you with the conundrum of, well, we've got to shift somebody on. Who is it? And it's the player that's going to have the demand, and in this case it's Nathan Baker. We've seen this deal be absolutely nowhere yesterday evening. There was absolutely nothing about Nathan Baker leaving Aston Villa. By this morning it's happening, and by midday it's been confirmed. You know, it shows how quickly transfers can move on, and when you're in that snap decision moment, sometimes you've got to make the call. Some other comments that have come in through on social media, Dale said ridiculous. Good to see him leave. Maybe Baker has asked for a move to get more playing time rather than back up for Chester and Terry. Jatinder said, shows the lad's ambition though. Would rather play every week than be second fiddle, or respect that absolute warrior. Yeah, I think he goes and leaves Villa Park with our best regards. I don't think anybody's going to hold anything against him for leaving Villa. This is probably a boardroom decision with Nathan Baker perhaps edging it. I know we're speculating here and it's wrong to speculate. I don't like speculating over things like this. But I do think that really it's partly to do with the fact that Nathan Baker's game time will be limited at Villa Park. When you're entering the age of 26, you've played a whole season last season where you played more or less week in, week out, then I'd be a bit worried.
My initial reaction with this one was I was very, very disappointed. Actually, I've had some time to mull over it since, and I have been appeased slightly by some of the stuff I've heard. But at first glance, this isn't something I was particularly happy with. I mean, I've since learned that the fee's actually better than I expected it would be for Nathan Baker. I think if certain things are met, then we actually stand to make more than the fee that's been reported in the mainstream press. So that's a good thing. He's just someone that I've always had a soft spot for, someone who I've always thought was a good player. In my opinion, he's only really had one really bad season, that was in Lambert's second season, but he came in last year having been on loan at Bristol, and he had a really, really good season. Obviously, he started off the season pretty much as third centre-half behind Chester and Elphick, and Elphick's obviously a very established player at Championship level, with or without the fact that he didn't have a very good season for Villa. But Baker made the centre-back space his own. He had a really, really good partnership with Chester, and with obviously John Terry being 36 and playing on the left-hand side, I felt that John Terry would probably miss a few games, so Nathan Baker would have got his fair share of football, and then maybe Samba would cover Chester, albeit they are very, very different centre halves. Obviously, we haven't sold him to a team that I expect to be a direct rival. You wouldn't expect Villa and Bristol City to be fighting at the same kind of levels next season, although now I've said that, I've probably absolutely cursed it, and Bristol City will go on to win the league. My initial thoughts was that it was a little short-sighted, because obviously the age of our defenders, our centre-backs that we have left now is pretty old, with Samba and Terry being pretty much well into their 30s. So if anything happens to Chester, you're not sure you can rely on the other two to stay fit and play every week. I had discounted Jedinak slightly at first. Obviously, he had a couple of good games at centre-back for us last season, and with Whelan now being in midfield, you'd think at some points maybe Jedinak could move back there in games when Whelan is used as the deep-lying midfielder. Richards is obviously the other cover as well, but he can't be relied on to stay fit, and I'm still yet to be convinced that in a two, he's a good option at centre-back. To me, he'd be a better defensive right-back for games that you think are going to be tight and you need to see out. Sullivan's another one that has been mentioned. Obviously, he's had a good time with England at the youth level in the summer, winning the World Cup with his national team. So he's someone who's obviously a hot prospect for the future. So obviously he comes into the centre-half mix as well, although I'd be shocked if he didn't spend some time out on loan this season. As I say, I've just always had a soft spot for Baker, so to see him go is disappointing, especially when I did feel he was just coming into his peak years. We were just starting to see the best of him. The flip side of the coin is probably that actually Nathan Baker maybe didn't want to be here, didn't want to play back up to John Terry and James Chester, and perhaps saw that his days might be numbered as a first team regular. But as I've also said, I think he would have got his fair share of game time. I also like the fact that he's left footed, so he offers balance, so that's something that we now don't have in the centre back. So I always think it's quite important. It's more important in a back three, but I think it's important in a two to have a left footer as well. I think it offers you balance, and Greg Evans has said that Baker was being looked at as the backup left back for Neil Taylor, which is quite bizarre because I've never thought Baker was a good left back, but now that maybe means that Amavi's staying, so that's good competition at left back if we hold on to him. One criticism I've always had of Baker is he doesn't score enough goals. He's not as much of a danger from set pieces as he should be, and obviously you've seen with Samba and Terry already, they look pretty potent from dead balls if we get the delivery right, so maybe that's another thing that's been taken into consideration with Baker and letting him go. I mean, obviously not getting rid of Amavi as well. There's the transfer financial fair play things that perhaps I think Matt's probably raised this point already, that Baker's actually someone who's sellable, whereas some of the other players we want to get rid of, there's simply no interest in them, so we're not going to be able to get rid of them. So it makes sense from a financial perspective to get rid of Baker. It is just the short-termism thing that worries me a little bit, but I put my trust in Bruce, I'll put my trust in Dr. Tony and Keith Weiner. So obviously they've got a plan, they've got an idea, and maybe they think that Baker was someone who would have to be replaced if we went up next year anyway, so we may as well cash in now while he's got a year left on his contract, I believe.
What is there in terms of demand for the other players? If there's no demand there for these players, then what else can you do? You've got to try and shift the bodies, you've got to try and balance the books out, and if that means selling somebody like Nathan Baker, then that's what happens. Alongside that, does Nathan Baker want the game time? Does he not feel he's going to get that at Villa Park when there's Chris Samba, John Terry, James Chester, these guys here? And thirdly, has Bruce got other plans in mind in terms of allowing somebody like Issa Suleiman, who I must say didn't have a very successful loan spell last season at Cheltenham, but did excellently with England? Surely that shows you've got the pedigree to do something. He's been burgeoning upon those lines for some time. You've got Jacob Bidu, and then you've got obviously Kevin Toner as well. These guys, there's plenty of backup in terms of the youth. It's not ideal, but you have to look at the other side of the scale here. What does it mean for our FFP? What does it mean for the budget that we've got? And was it just that Nathan Baker really did want the playing time? I can only wish him the best of luck, and I suppose that's all we can do now with it. So what are your thoughts on Nathan Baker leaving Aston Villa? Do you think it's short-sighted from the club, or do you think it really was the right time for Nathan Baker to leave? Did you not rate him last season? Did you? I want to know all the thoughts in the comments section below. If you have enjoyed this video, then please do like it, and if you are new to the Villa View, then please do subscribe with your post notifications on. If you enjoyed that video, why not watch another one? Click the video choices on screen now to go and watch them in full. And don't forget to subscribe. Click on our logo there on the left and press subscribe. Easy.